Tottenham Hotspur have appointed Thomas Frank as their new head coach.
And the consistency and the players know the patterns. But of course I'm aware that we need to be flexible sometimes.
You look what Thomas Frank has done over the course of 7 highly successful years, and you can understand why Tottenham would be interested.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 254, and I've got a man who is not somehow going to be named the third sporting director of Tottenham Hotspur, despite all of our wishes. He is Scott Bird. He's at Scotchy Bird on the socials. What's going on, my friend? How are you?
Just hoping the Spurs call me to be the third sporting director is what I've been doing lately.
You hadn't even thought about that, had you? I put that little bug in your head.
I had not, but I think I would have to say that's my dream job. So I'd be happy to work with either one of those guys. I think I could get along swimmingly with Pratici, not because I'm a criminal, but because we're both of Italian descent, right? He is Italian. Yeah, so Spurs, call me up. Check out some takes today if you want. We'll call it a job interview.
There you go. Now the test is really on. We are recording this on Tuesday, a day before Spurs head to Monaco in the Champions League. So obviously we're not going to be talking a lot about that, other than the fact that there are a rash of injuries all of a sudden in the defensive lineup for the club, which we will touch on, of course. It started when we found out on Sunday, when Spurs were set to face Aston Villa, that Christian Romero, who was originally in the lineup, was removed from the lineup and has an adductor strain now and is not going to make the Monaco match. And it's kind of a up in the air situation with him. A few other injuries of note. Obviously, we know Destiny Udogie is not making the trip to Monaco as well. Ben Davis is going to be out for a few weeks, although he hasn't really seen much of the pitch anyway. Kolo Amani made his way back, which is nice, but the injuries are starting to pile up here for Spurs on the men's side of things, which is obviously not great, and especially when they're coming in the defensive part of the pitch where Spurs, I feel like, are already pretty thin. So something we'll certainly have to monitor. Before we get into any of that, Scott, let's touch on the Villa match. It's a 2-1 home defeat, and this was a game that, honestly, they start out with the early goal from Bentancur, and I'm thinking, all right, let's go. This is going to be a great home match against a team that had come in hot, which we talked about last week, but is a very beatable team, and they end up giving the game away, much to their own doing, but also a little bit of credit to Villa for putting together what they could in that counterattacking sense. But what was your overall takeaway from this one?
Yeah, I mean, we came out hot, scored quickly, and then Kudus almost had a second, but was barely offside, right? So I think at that point you're starting to feel really good about what you're seeing. Villa they're, you could say, in form, but had to get themselves there. It took a little while, right? So it felt like this one was ours for the taking, but as we've seen somewhat regularly this year, right? Spurs kind of let off the gas at home. It is actually, and I'm sure this is fairly well known at this point, right? But it is our worst start at home at this point in the Premier League season since 2008, which is mildly concerning. I will say that it is, for those who are keeping score, it is worse than last year's start at home. And we all know what happened last year, right? No, I'm not trying to sound alarm bells. We sit 5 points off the top, and there's a lot of season left. I would also say, do I expect us to win the league? No, I do not, right? So I'm not saying we're 5 points off the top as if we're chasing the title contenders right at the top of the pile. But my point is that it's not all doom and gloom, but it's a little bit concerning to see us dropping points from a winning position at home. That's just something that simply can't happen if you're a serious team.
Well, and I think that the Romero miss is obviously a big one, but Kevin Danso steps in and does what he does. He's a very good defender. But when you lose Romero in that scenario, because he offers you so much from a passing standpoint and from balls over the top and just from getting the ball forward, which is what Spurs are lacking right now, is that ability to connect from defense to attack through the midfield. I think that's just a really, really notable thing. And obviously, if Romero is going to be out for any kind of length of time, that leaves you with Van de Ven and Danso and not much else behind them, especially with Kotokai still not back, especially with Ben Davis now being hurt. There's not a lot else, and Radu Dragusin is obviously still making his way back from the center back position as well. I guess Archie Gray could slot in there if need be. We saw João Palhinha play there in the League Cup match earlier this year, so there is some movement that Thomas Frank has the ability to do, but I just think that is a really tough miss. The other part of the pitch I wanted to talk about though was that midfield, because we've now seen this Palhinha Bentancur double pivot a couple of times, and I know it's something that's frustrating fans because there doesn't seem to be a lot of ball progression with those two guys. It's more Bentancur will not progress the ball; he will pass the ball backwards, and Palhinha is there to make tackles and win the ball back, which he does. But it's also ironic that they linked up for the lone goal for Spurs. Palhinha assisting Bentancur, but there's something that smells foul about that midfield still, and I think it's more of it's not so much a problem with playing them both. It's more of what's going on around them that creates the issue, because you've got a young front line that's not, everyone's kind of harping on Xavi Simons so far. And I think it's going to take him time to adjust to a new league. And I just think there's not enough experience up top in the attack to allow for that little of passing in the midfield as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, Romero very much ties into this conversation because, as we've talked about on this show, all of our ball progression when Palhinha and Bentancur are on the pitch comes from our right center back, which is fine. I mean, if something works, it works, right? But Romero is a huge miss, and it deeply impacted the midfield. I'm not the biggest fan of Palhinha and Bentancur on the pitch together. Again, Romero alleviates those concerns, but I would say throughout the X amount of games we played this year, 10, 11, 12, something like that, I really haven't seen anything that I've really liked when those two are on the pitch together. Right? We've gotten results with those two on the pitch together, but it hasn't necessarily been pretty. For me, it begs the question, what's going on with Sarr? What's going on with Bergvall? Right? Because I would rather see either of them in the 8 than Bentancur at this point. And I think Bentancur is we talked about it already. I think Bentancur is a fantastic depth piece to have on the bench, at least 60% of matches, maybe 65, maybe starting the other 35% of matches, 70-30, whatever we want to say there, right? But Bentancur is a wonderful piece, but I don't think he's the answer at the 8 position. I do think João Palhinha is very much the answer at the 6 position, but I'm just confused as to Bentancur starts. If you look at his pass map, he progressed the ball 3 times. He played 3 progressive passes. They were all turnovers. Anything he completed was either sideways or backwards, which, I mean, that's okay. It's not always black and white like that. But if you look at their heat maps, Palhinha primarily sits between the center backs yesterday. Xavi Simons sits right underneath the striker, and Bentancur is on either touchline, and there's a gaping hole in the midfield, right? So that's somewhat on Xavi Simons too. He's going to have to understand that in the Premier League, especially at a team like Spurs, you're going to have to be involved in the progression of the ball a little bit more than he has been. But a lot of that falls to the 8 position, and I think either Sarr or Bergvall both do a better job than Bentancur did yesterday. So.
Yeah, I mean, you basically have Pedro Porro to be able to progress the ball from the back line forward, because you're not getting that out of the midfield. And you're really not getting it out of Jed Spence either, which is not a knock on Jed Spence, because he's an incredible defender and that's what he's being asked to do. Yeah. But maybe Udogie gives you a little bit more in that sense. We've seen him come back and make a slight impact, but it's tough to watch when you have very little going forward. I brought his name up earlier too in the context of perhaps having to fill in at center back with all the injuries, but I'm still surprised we're not seeing more of Archie Gray as well in that midfield, either in the 6 role or playing with Palhinha in the 8. I think that's something that I want to see very soon, because I think that he's a player that we saw so much out of him last year, and obviously playing in so many different places, between playing fullback, center back, and midfield, at kind of different points of the season. I just think that he is a real talent and needs to see more minutes at this point, and I'm surprised he has not seen more. So we'll have to kind of see how that goes.
I think what I would add to that is I agree, but I think Archie at this point is closer to minutes at fullback based on the personnel situation than he is in the midfield. Again, that's just based off his ability to do it. I have no idea, right? Archie is very talented. When I look at Paulinho, Bentaker, Sar, Bergvall, who is the same age as Archie Gray, but has proven himself to be very capable of this level. Archie is probably the least equipped to walk onto the pitch and immediately make the impact required, right? Just again, based on age and where he's at in his career. But yeah, I mean, I think there's every reason to think that Archie Gray should be getting some sort of opportunity to show what he's capable of. So I agree with you. Maybe it sounds like I'm disagreeing, but I'm not. I also think part of the issue that that we're seeing right now is we're yesterday especially we're expecting a lot from the wing positions, right, in the attack, and I still see Odebear as just a possession black hole at this point in time, and I think it's really throwing the entire attack off. It's throwing ball progression off. It's probably throwing the midfield off at times, right? Kudus does a wonderful job when he receives the ball, but Odebear continues to just turn the ball over anytime it comes to him, whether it's a step over, a misplayed pass, just simply losing the ball, right? So I think with him, it's a combination of a confidence thing mixed with maybe his level, right? And that sounds a little bit harsh because he's young, but I think we're going to need to see a little bit more out of the left wing position in order to allow the midfield to do a little bit more of what it's looking to do. I think Javi Simons gets a little clustered. I want to say confused, but just clustered with the poor play from Odebear too, because I think there's there's like internal pressure coming from himself to himself to make a little bit more happen on in that area of the pitch. But like I said, his heat map shows that he was not helping progress the ball. And again, when you play with the six, that's always going to drop between the center backs when you're 10 or you're more attacking 8 or whatever we want to call Javi Simons is that high up. It's going to create a lot of problems for your 8, who is Bentaker, and we all know that he had a really hard time progressing the ball. That very much falls on Javi Simons, because if there's no one in front of you to progress the ball to, it becomes increasingly difficult to progress the ball, right? And that's where we see a lot of sideways and backwards passes from Bentaker too. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, as you can tell. I think it ranges from the 8 position all the way up to the left wing at this point in time, and potentially even the 9, because Tell spends a little too much time wide left than he does in the center of the pitch right now.
Well, and potentially even the goalkeeper, but I do want to leave that
Yeah,
there because
yeah.
we've talked enough about Vicario. But man, like there's more people than I would have expected at this point that are out for Vicario and wanting him to see the bench for Kinski, and I'm not there yet. But everyone knows, everyone who's been a longtime Depot listener knows that I'm a Vicario skeptic, and I want to see more. And he makes some brilliant saves sometimes, but man, there's some instances where I'm just like, it's got to be better than that. Especially, and again, part of that is because there's not a ball playing center back, and there's not enough in the midfield for him to just have to do more of the distribution himself. That's just not a part of his game, and it's showing up in certain times. So
Yeah, I agree on Vicario. I think questions are right to be asked at this point in time. I will caveat that with I don't necessarily think just dropping in for Kinski is a great move either. I think, and this isn't directed at you in response to what you said. This is just again into the void of Spurs fans. Selective memory is a real thing. I think people think about Kinski's performance against Liverpool in the first leg of the Carabao Cup last year, right, which was phenomenal, but he had some really shaky performances after that. Very shaky performances. So again, selective memory probably plays a little bit into there. If my honest opinion on Vicario is if we want to elevate ourselves, we sell Vicario, replace him with someone who is, I don't want to say a world-class keeper, but a top-tier keeper, right? And then Kinski continues to develop. But again, that's a whole nother conversation.
and I just think there's bigger issues right now
Yeah,
that need to be taken care
for
of
sure.
before that. So this is I mentioned it at the top. This is probably going to be a quick a slightly shorter episode than usual, just because we're on a time crunch, you and I. But I did want to talk about this whole Johan Lange Fabio Paratici thing a little bit more in depth here, because I don't know. I think we all knew Fabio Paratici was coming back to the club in some capacity, and nobody was really sure what that was. And when we got the news last week that he and Johan Lange are going to both be sporting director and not share the role. It's not like they are. I mean, they are sharing the role, but they're both in the same position now and doing the same job, albeit with some different allocations of resources here. But what was your initial reaction when you heard this? Because for me, I was a little confused as to why they would name two different sporting directors at the same time. But in the weeks since, I guess I kind of understand it a little bit more, just because there's going to be a delegation of duties between the two of them.
Yeah, I love it actually. I think that Johan Longa, am I saying that correctly? I've fumbled
Could
this
be.
for quite some time, so we'll say Johan. He looks to have a real eye for young talent, like exceptional eye for young talent. And Paratici has quite an eye for not only ready-made players, but ready-made players who can be brought in unique ways, right? And on top of that, Paratici knows everyone. Like he just knows everybody. And that's someone that you always want to have. So if both of them are willing to work together as a duo, I think then fantastic. It's a little bit unique, but I think that's only unique because there's way too many egos in football. And I think if you're willing to again work with somebody who fills the gaps that you fill as an employee or whatever, right? I think that's a fantastic thing and something that I think just the world in general could probably benefit from a little bit more of. So, anyways, I'll get off my soapbox, but I like the move.
I did sit through their sit down last week that the club posted on YouTube, and they seem to be on the same page. I don't know how much of a relationship they had prior to this or what, but I think the more important thing than the two of them working together is actually going to be the two of them working with Thomas Frank, and
Yeah.
he seems to be totally on board. And look, maybe everyone's just paying lip service, and maybe this is something that they're going to have to grow into a little bit more than it just being ready to go from here. But with all the change that the club has experienced in the last, handful of months, let's call it the last 6 to 8 months, this is a move that I think is, it at least gives them direction, and at least gives them, because we've kind of been wondering, like, who really is making all of these decisions. And with all the changes that have been made, now we know, and now there is at least a direction to point our ire at, if that's required, or to point our praise at, which we hope is required. But it is a unique situation where you have two different guys basically as the co-sporting directors. So I thought that was an interesting thing to note.
Well, and I think, yeah, I agree. And I think to another interesting piece to all of this is, again, like I've said, it's rare that you have this type of partnership, right? But so many clubs, I would say every club in Europe is either doing a great job with its youth or doing a great job of preparing for the now and neglecting the youth, right? So it's very rare that you see both things done so well. Potentially Barcelona, potentially Real Madrid. Real Madrid despise people, so I wouldn't necessarily say that, but Barcelona is a great example. Man City is really the only other example that I can think of, right, that does both things really well. And I think this is a move that could get Spurs there. And then you add that to the $100 million war chest that was just injected into the club, whatever that means, right? But my point is money's being invested back into the team. We publicly are being made aware of this. So those two things pair pretty nicely together, I would say.
Obviously, January will be big, and obviously with the injuries that are starting to pile up already, that's going to be where I look next for these two guys, because it's going to be important for them to reinforce in January, to kind of hold the line, if you will. And honestly, we talked about it last week, these next handful of weeks where there are so many games coming. We talked about it. Another game as we record this on Tuesday, tomorrow in Monaco, then another game on Sunday against Everton, and then Spurs are back in the Cup at Newcastle next week. So, and I saw Newcastle got a big Champions League victory today over Jose Mourinho and Benfica. Like, these are all going to be games, and especially the next couple of them away from home, that are a challenge. So I'm really interested to see where this team can come out of this, like, really, really tough run of fixtures where it's just so many games in so few days, and there's not a lot of depth to go around, especially when you consider that you've left a few of these players that are available or are soon to be coming back out of the Champions League for the group phase. So that's certainly something to note as well.
Yeah,
So it'll be
well,
a challenge all around.
yeah, and yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because tomorrow is really important because of yesterday. I think if you put in a good performance tomorrow against Monaco away, maybe all is forgiven. But if tomorrow doesn't look good, again, I'm not talking about Thomas Frank or anything when I say this, but if tomorrow doesn't look good, there's going to be some frustration starting to fester around the fan base, right? Which again means nothing other than that, but always nice to avoid those types of things. So tomorrow's important. It's also more important because, like you said, Newcastle gets a big one today. A certain team that's close to us geographically absolutely just wiped the floor with a really informed Atletico Madrid team today, who just wiped the floor with Real Madrid last week or 10 days ago or something, right? So, yeah, there's some stiff competition in every competition that we play in, and tomorrow is going to have to be a good performance if we want to not start chewing each other's heads off as Tottenham fans.
Which we'll do anyway. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
for sure,
Let's just be
without a
honest.
doubt.
That's gonna
Todd will be
happen.
back soon, and that'll all all
No,
all come
yeah,
in.
exactly. No such worries for Spurs women over the weekend. They get what was just honestly a comfortable 3-0 victory over Birmingham City in the League Cup. It was routine, and I say that with every grain of salt because it was a second tier team that they faced in the League Cup, but it just looked smooth. 2 goals from Olivia Holt, a goal from Amanda Nilden, and it was just like I said, they dominated the ball. There really wasn't much to it. The only real downside is Metea Rose picks up a torn ACL in the match. She's obviously going to miss the rest of the season, you would imagine, with that kind of an injury. A player that I've kind of wanted to see more of, despite her lack of size and stature, and it seems so small in comparison to other players in the WSL. But that's another unfortunate midfield injury for a player that I've wanted to see more from. But it's the international break now on the women's side, so there is a little bit of breathing room before the next match. Did you have any takeaways for Spurs women's victory over Birmingham?
I'm going to be very transparent to the listener. I've not watched the women's game yet. I'm on vacation in the very, very, very south of Texas, visiting my parents. I mean, when I say South Texas, if there's a good coffee shop across the border, it would not be a problem for me to go grab a cup of coffee across the border and pop back over, right? So I'm in chill mode. The men's game was on in the background. There was no way I was watching two matches at the same time.
It's
But
hard. It's
the
hard, man. I hate when
yeah,
they're playing at the same time. It's very difficult.
yeah. Now I will call myself out and say the failure is that I had every intention to have watched the women's match by now, but got the little one down with the parents for the first time and just been busy. But I will watch it. But all that to say, I am just I'm just so pleasantly surprised by what Martin Ho has brought to this team. They look really good. They're not playing like flashy football, but they're just playing really good, sound football. Fundamentals are spot on, defensively sound, which is I don't care what like the hipsters of the footballing world say. Defense is where everything starts from. You build your base defensively and you go from there, right? And Martin Ho's doing doing it the right way. So I'm just very pleasantly surprised by him, and I'm really just surprised by so many of these players. And again, omitting yesterday because I haven't watched yet, but looking across the entire season, so many of these players are just doing exactly what I talked about on an individual level. Just good fundamental positional soccer. I keep talking about Tinka. Her physical play is making a world of difference, right? And it really I wouldn't say Martha is physical. I think Beth can be, but Tinka has allowed Beth to do more than just be like a hold up striker, which she's so much more than that, right? And that's been a
Yeah.
huge piece of this. Um, so yeah, just hats off to Martin Ho for unlocking this team in the way that he has. And as much as the men's team can be irritating at times, it's probably time for all Tottenham fans to focus more of their attention on the women's team because some really good things are happening over there right now. And I'm not calling for a WSL title, but I'm just saying the women's team is playing some really good soccer right now, and it's really fun to watch.
They do still sit ahead of Arsenal in the table for the time being, so we can
Most
savor
important.
that for a little bit longer. They are, of course, atop their Group E in the League Cup as well. One more match to play in the League Cup against Bristol City, so we'll hope for at least a draw out of that. They should win that game though and advance as group winners in the League Cup. The WSL returns on November the. I had it right here. November the 1st. I believe it's November the 1st. Might be the 2nd. But it's a couple weeks away. November 2nd. They play Sunday, and they play Liverpool, who have not won a match yet this season. There's two teams in the WSL who are over, don't even have a point yet, and that's Liverpool and West Ham. So we'll have to see how that goes. I can't imagine anybody would be too afraid of that match, but it is another opportunity for Martin Ho's team to come back strong. There's a lot of call ups for this window too. I think there were 8 or 9 call ups, something like that, and a couple of youth call ups as well. No Jess Naz in the England squad, but a bunch of call ups for the women as well. So you can catch them on the international break this week as well. We're going to be back to talk next week about the men because they, like I said, they're playing Monaco, they're playing Everton. They've got the Newcastle match next week in the League Cup. There's going to be plenty to talk about. We appreciate all the listeners for popping in a little bit later than we usually are in the week. We're trying to make it work for you all. But Scott, thank you so much for popping on this week, and we're gonna have fun. Be sure to follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot. Make sure you leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice. We will be back with you next week for another podcast. As always, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. Come on, you Spurs.